My name is Mary Lynn Bourne, and I have had many of you in this room as students of mine. But for those of you who don't know me, I am the program director for the real estate department, both the MRED and BRED programs. And I also teach market analysis at the graduate and undergraduate level. So many of you either have passed through my doors or not yet. I also had a couple of the Ross participants in my class as well. So welcome everyone today. I'm delighted to be able to be here and see so many women in real estate. You know, I feel like, I'm definitely part of the old guard here, but back in my day, right? But there really were not really women in real estate very much back then. And sometimes I'm still shocked when I go to industry events and I still don't see a tremendous amount of women. So the industry is slow to adapt, and we're still growing. There's still so many wonderful opportunities for women in this industry, and I'm so excited to be a support to all of you and have you all support each other as a community of USC women in real estate. So delighted to have you here, so welcome. So it's my honor to introduce our moderator for the panel today, Lynn King-Tolliver. We met a couple of years back. She's one of the members of our LUSC board and is a very active at USC and with LUSC. And so she's participated in many different groups. She's on several boards, very involved with the Urban Land Institute as well. Lynn has over 25 years of investment management experience at the executive level. She has her own firm. She has invested over 25 million square feet of real estate acquisitions valued at over $5 billion in terms of transaction value. So huge breadth of experience that she has to bring to the table. I had a little bit of fun today, or yesterday, I should say, when I was looking up her background to talk today. And so I looked up her firm, and the firm, I would have completely botched the translation of it. I would have botched the name of it because it's Archere. So I would have been like Archere or something. So, but she's kindly on her website has how she came up with the name. And it's actually Archere, which is the feminine singular of archer in French. So I love it for so many different reasons. But in it, she says, she also has the definition from the English dictionary, which says a person who shoots an arrow, particularly at a target. And so that her firm really has a focused, targeted approach to real estate investing, which really, to me, after knowing Lynn, I believe is her approach to life. You know, she is phenomenally focused and very targeted, and it speaks so much to your experience and to your phenomenal success, and to you as a role model for all of us. So we're delighted to have you here, and I'm going to let the panelists all come up, and then they will be working with Lynn to introduce themselves. So thank you.
So, but to get us started today, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about them, and including their when they left USC.
Okay, I'll start. Natalia Romo. I'm BRED class of 2018. I'm a senior project manager at Park Lane Projects. And just a little bit about. Okay, so as a project manager, I'm also acting as owner's representative, and we usually get clients that are looking to build their dream homes, and these are ultra high net individuals. So I'm managing projects from design all the way through to construction and handover, and usually our budgets are starting at $10 million for these single family homes, so very unique.
Hi everyone, my name is Leora Hakim. I double majored in business administration and real estate development. I graduated in 2019. I'm currently a project manager at Thomas James Homes. We are the largest infill single-family residential builder in the country. I am primarily focused in West LA. I build homes in Santa Monica, Venice, Mar Vista, Culver City, and act more as like a true superintendent. I'm in the construction field about 80% of my day, and the rest I work either from home or in the office, updating schedules, coordinating with inspectors, our third-party trades, and all of our subcontractors. We will also be playing a big role in the Palisades redevelopment. So yeah, it's a unique opportunity to be able to help rebuild a big loss in our city.
Hey everyone, Madison Baker. I graduated USC MBA MRED in 2020. Prior to grad school, I was working in architecture, so that's my background. And then after school, I've been working in development. Now I'm a development manager at Goldrich Kest. They're a local multifamily owner-operator, and I'm working on the development team. And in that role, I'm managing the soup to nuts of the project from beginning feasibility, financial analysis, market analysis, through entitlements and approvals, and then through design and permitting. And then I hand off to the construction side, so I stay out of that realm.
Great. And then I'm Jenny Rossi. I graduated USC's MRED in 2017. Before that, I have an undergrad degree from Cal Poly of planning. So my background, kind of lent itself to do what I do now, which I work for a company called Madison Capital Group, but I work on their self-storage platform. It's a very small team. And so I, similar to Madison, kind of see it from the acquisition and due diligence through construction though, with emphasis on the entitlements and kind of the land use aspect, especially because with self-storage, I think in comparison to other product types, you can have a lot of projects running at the same time. They're very fast. So while, it may only seem that I work on just the entitlements, I'm working on 10 to 12 at a time.
As giving us kind of the background and a little bit of perspective of when you guys left the industry, kind of my first question, which they have seen the questions, but we haven't actually all talked through them. Looking back on entering your career, when you left SC and you just got started, what do you wish you had either known, or is there a skill that you wish you'd had that kind of you want to share with the audience and think that is something that would be valuable to them to know? We'll start with you.
Yeah, I think one thing that I had no idea was how important your relationships with your employees, or not employees, but just everyone that you work with is. It's maybe even more important than the actual work that you're doing a lot of the time. So just being really mindful of the way that I interact with people and being genuine, but making sure that I'm always putting my best foot forward in every interaction that I have, because you never know how a relationship can come back in the future, and just knowing that just because you're starting out as an intern or in an entry-level role doesn't mean that you shouldn't play the part of what you want to be moving forward. So I would just remind myself that if I was starting again.
Yeah, that's important.
I think it's important to adapt. It's when you take a job, you're pretty familiar with the job description. You've had interviews. They've told you, okay, this is what a typical day in the role will look like. And until you're really there, you have no idea. And even if you're doing 90% of that job description, there's always going to be something additional or something that's left out of that. And I think that COVID was a really big representation of exactly that. I started out my career in commercial real estate finance at Wells Fargo, and we went from underwriting a lot of new properties into almost entirely asset management. And that wasn't part of my job description at the time, but it was a need for the company. It was a need for our clients. And in order to protect those relationships, the role entirely changed. And again, I think similarly now with the Palisades fires and the Altadena fires, our role is shifting. We have to adapt our business model to cater to a neighborhood or a group of people that wasn't part of necessarily our original business model, but there's a need that has to be met. And in your role, you have to adapt to be able to meet that need.
Yeah. And I think kind of going off Natalia's point, from the technical skill side, anything you learn in school, you're going to learn so much more as soon as you hit the job, you're going to be like, wow. So I wouldn't be worried about oh, I need to make sure I know all these technical aspects before you enter the workforce. But, I think similar to what Natalia is saying, is like those personal relationships are so much more important. At the end of the day, whatever line of real estate you're in, it's a people business. And I think like everything in a job is about selling, like whatever you're doing. You have to know how to sell your ideas, how to talk to people, sell your ideas. I deal, and Jenny probably does too, like with community meetings, like selling your ideas to neighbors and city council and planning, all this stuff. So learning how to sell and talk to people and talk to them the way they can understand you is so important. And along with that, kind of negotiating, meeting someone where they are is so important.
I would, a combination of what everyone said, but to emphasize the technical skills are probably something that I still struggle to like model, to be honest. I am not good at Excel. And my boss wouldn't, want me just blasting that, but he's aware of my inadequacies and we sort of make up for it. And we've worked together for a long time now where he kind of knows where I probably am lacking, and he lets me really shine where I do well, which is like more of a community front, community interaction, a lot of working directly with cities and having long-lasting relationships from before I even went to MRED. So, I think you also learn to kind of divide and conquer and know that like if you are with a team or if you're going out on your own, you need to have people who assist you and are on your side that make up for the parts that maybe you're not an expert in, because you just can't possibly be awesome at it all. Or that's what I tell myself.
No, I think those are all really good points. One of the other things I think is really important to have, and I learned to be okay asking questions, be just infinitely curious and willing to ask. There's so much information that's available to us, you could Google it, right? But the experts are going to also tell you the nuances of how something is applied that doesn't come through in the Google response, right? And we also still have to remember that, I'm not really a fan of the fact that I Google it and the first thing that comes up is an AI answer, and I realize that's not accurate. So please be curious, talk to people. That's how you build those relationships. And people love to help and shine where they're the expert, and then that expertise gets passed on to you. So be infinitely curious and willing to kind of ask questions. So along those lines, that's what I felt was one of my most valuable personal skills, was to ask those questions and be willing to take in that information. What do you feel like, Madison? What was one of your most valuable personal skills that you felt was necessary in your job search?
In the job search?
Or in your career?
Job? Yeah, I think kind of what you're saying is like with being curious, I think being a self-starter and like just taking initiative, you cannot sit around and wait for someone to tell you what to do. That's not going to happen. Your bosses are too busy. So I think you really have to show your value. You're thinking ahead. You're thinking 3, 4, 5 steps ahead, and you come to them with your ideas. Oh, I thought about approaching this in this way. And I think that really helps a lot gain trust with your manager or whomever you're working with.
Yeah, similar to that, a piece of advice, that was one of the questions that I got early on in my career, and it's been very useful, is it's not that there necessarily is ever a no or this can't be done, but you're expected to come to me with what is possible, what can be done, even if it's the most, small improvement from no or it can't be done. At least it's a starting point of the conversation and we can build on that together. But I've always kind of had that mentality of like, wow, this is, really seems impossible, but like, what's just the smallest piece we can do and go from there? And then it just seems to kind of snowball into finally being able to be possible. But I think with managers and bosses, it's been a good, way to show up and know that you're coming with your own ideas and you're not just putting, time on the clock. You're there to also add value.
Yeah. I think on that note, like, don't come to your manager just with a problem. Come with them with a problem, but say, oh, I think this could be the solution to this, as opposed to just like having them solve everything for you. I think that's really helpful.
I think oftentimes in corporate settings, things can seem really black and white, or there's a lot of red tape. And I think still pushing that boundary and that border can really benefit you and the company. There's often times where, I'll see an issue with a contract and I'll say, this doesn't really make sense. And, the answer could be, well, that's just the way we do things. But if you continue to bring, a solution, a recommendation, or even just question it, I think it really starts the conversation. And it leads to more of an open door policy between you and management, or you and your director, or even you and your coworkers who are at the same level. I think that, again, curiosity, we've mentioned, really, it helps push the envelope.
Yeah, and especially right now, you're in this unique position where you're going to be going into the workforce and no one is expecting you to know everything. So ask every single question. Be curious, like you said, and it is so much better to be the person that's asking questions than the person that doesn't know what they're talking about and everyone knows. So ask every question. Don't be afraid to not know.
Yeah, that's a really good advice. Also, your point about be willing to question. If you see something that doesn't make sense, or it's not logical, or you think there's potentially a better way, because when you're the new eyes in an organization, you're new to a job, you're bringing a perspective that is different than the people who've been doing it for 10 years. And honestly, it's one of the challenges that you lose that. After a while, you've been doing it, you got your way, the company has its way, there are these certain processes. But when you're the new person, if you can kind of try to take that new perspective, why do we do it this way? Is it the most efficient? Is there a different way? Is there new technology that we should be using that we're not using? You're in a great position to kind of introduce those things and continue to, to make yourself more valuable to the organization. So how many of you have been in any kind of a career transition? And we can talk about this also in terms of when you got started, how you found your position, but then also if you've already made a job change, either within or outside of your organization. So we can talk about that, because I think some of those career transitions, whether it's the transition of getting started, moving from school into a career, or navigating the career path.
Within the real estate development program, as well as Marshall, the business administration program, oftentimes students are kind of funneled into commercial real estate, often finance, and that's the step that I took out of USC. I worked at Wells Fargo in their commercial real estate finance group. I interviewed on campus. I got the job on campus. It was really like a smooth transition. There was an analyst program, so there were 10 other individuals in my position. Some were USC grads. So it was a really unique, you're going from undergrad and then kind of into a mini undergrad where everyone is experiencing the same thing as you. And I think it helped me get settled pretty quickly, but I also found that commercial real estate wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. I think that I had a great experience in that I was exposed to so many different asset types. I had storage, retail, multifamily, office, hotel. You're exposed to so much, and I think it really was it proved itself relatively quickly that it wasn't where my heart was. And so I knew about single family residential development through the Trojan Real Estate Association. I went on a site tour my junior year. I found out about Toll Brothers. They're a public home builder. And I also networked with them at the career fair. They weren't hiring at the time that I graduated, but I kept in touch with the recruiter and 2 project managers. And once my role at Wells Fargo shifted to be more asset management heavy, and I didn't feel like I was necessarily growing in the direction that I wanted to, I saw that Toll Brothers was hiring for a project management position. I reached out to the recruiter and kind of reestablished that relationship, and it worked out really great. Again, in line with what I said before, even if you see a job description, you know what you're anticipating, it's not always that. And I found that at Toll Brothers as well. I really wanted to learn how to build. It was important for me if I see myself in home building, I want to understand, how do I frame a house? How do I put in drywall? How do I punch out a home and make sure all the finishes are in A+ condition? And so Toll Brothers had undergone a transition right before I had started. And so I was primarily in the office. And so I pivoted again within home building and found a role where I was overseeing all the construction. So I think that there is a lot of navigation, whether you're coming from undergrad and starting out your career, or whether you're in the MRED program and you're pivoting out of that. There's not one route. The first step doesn't need to be the perfect step. There's so many ways to pivot and navigate.
Yeah, I'm probably one of the older ones on the panel that I have experienced both like the '08 downturn, COVID downturn. Both times I was laid off. So I think that presents an interesting aspect of your kind of career trajectory. But at the same time, I look back and I never could have predicted where my path would have taken me. And we were talking about how it's not necessarily, I definitely didn't climb a mountain. I didn't go this way. I definitely did this, and so I landed exactly where I need to be. And of course I couldn't tell the 18 or 22-year-old me that, graduating undergrad, that's where I would end up. But I think just kind of always keeping in mind that it is a long game. The relationships, especially in real estate, are so important. I currently work for the first boss that hired me outside of MRED. Always stayed in touch with them, always had a good rapport. Just because of life changes, we went different ways. But then when he recruited me back, it was, again, just like it was all meant to be. And so I think always having that in mind that, maybe right now this isn't the perfect fit, or this isn't the role that I saw for myself, but you'll be surprised by what jobs are maybe not your favorite, but end up being very valuable in your experience and unique. I worked on the public side when it was '08, and that was, working for a city and a county is very different than any other job I've had. And, that's what made me go to grad school. So I look back and I'm like, okay, that was a really good experience. And I used so much knowledge from that role specifically that I would have never realized that I'm where I'm at now. So.
Yeah, and I'm actually in the middle of a bit of a transition. So I'm leaving my current company after 4 years, and I'm kind of branching off into I'm working for a private lender now, still in their construction division. But the reason being is I wanted to do something with a slightly better work-life balance, because I've been taking on a lot of projects personally, which, going back to the relationships, the first job that I worked at out of USC was a home, they're like a national home flipper. And a lot of the people that I met working there have now branched off and started their own companies, and they need project managers. So they don't really have the bandwidth to hire someone full time. So they've been hiring me on more like a contract basis. So I've been kind of working on that, and it got to the point where I was just too busy. I wasn't able to manage both at the same time. And still keeping a good relationship with my current employer, I'm starting to branch off and do my own thing now. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm in the middle of that transition right now too.
That's an interesting point. I think one of the things that I'm also the current president of our African American Real Estate Professionals Los Angeles chapter. And one of the things, as we talk about supporting our members through their career journeys, we've recently added to our understanding that also means often a bit of a journey through entrepreneurism back to being a corporate employee, or from being a corporate employee to entrepreneur, and that's an interesting transition, and that one that careers take so many different paths now. It's not uncommon for one to have done one and then do the other, or vice versa, and that's going to be maybe the experience that a lot of you had. Certainly, I would say I spent, like she mentioned, the first 25 years of my career as definitely a corporate employee, and at that time had I didn't know that being an entrepreneur would be on my trajectory or that I would, spend. And as it is now, I think I'm going on 8 years independent, which is, just kind of incredible. And the part where she talked about this being a small world. So the relationships, whether you leave an organization, stay with an organization, you're transitioning, all of the relationships are really important because the world is only getting smaller because of our connectedness. And then within the industry, people move all around. And like you mentioned, you left and then now you're back working with a boss that you worked before, whether it's a transition or you're managing a project. It's amazing to me how many names come back around throughout your career and the things that we're working on. So when you're thinking about some of the things that happen when you're making, whether it's a career transition or just even navigating your own position, there may be various as you think about some of these things, and some of them you've already faced, and some of them will be coming your way. So we can add that perspective as well. When you think about what might be your reason for seeking a new position and how might you navigate that, whether it's seeking a higher role, actual promotion, or new skills, because sometimes that's what's needed to facilitate a change, or a higher growth sector industry. What are some of the things that you might think about that you think would be good perspective for the audience to think about as they're encountering these things in their own career choices?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to one of Jenny's points is there's this long game, right? And it's really, you can never see it when you're in the thick of it. That's impossible. But I think, I've tried to balance out my skill set in order to help me grow to where I think I might want to be one day. And so in past job transition, I was very focused on project execution, and that worked really well with my background in architecture, but I don't want to be stuck in project execution forever. So in a transition, I was like, okay, I need more exposure, more experience on the finance side, market analysis, to show that I can do that and have that as part of my experience and resume. So being able to kind of take a step back and figure out where you really want to learn more to kind of balance out that picture for yourself and where you see yourself going is really helpful. And no one's going to do it for you. Also, I think no one is looking out for your career the way you have to. And so you really have to advocate for yourself, if it's with an internal transition or realize this isn't working for me anymore, I'm not growing here anymore. You have to be the one to take that initiative to, make that change.
Yeah, on that point, sort of why my boss now left the company and I ended up getting laid off, but he left the company that we were working at is it was not a very progressive company, I'll put it that way. And, he didn't appreciate that they didn't recognize the value in maybe some of the female employees, which is kind of the reason we're all here, and some other employees. And it just highlighted the fact that, your career can only go so far sometimes. And if that's not the right place for you, that doesn't mean there's not somewhere else that will be a better opportunity. And so when he approached me with coming back to work for him, one of the first conversations was, will I have a seat at the table? Will I be taken seriously? Will they, will the investors that we go to investment committee, listen to me just because I'm, Curl. And it was very eye-opening to work for a company where I wasn't recognized, even with experience, even with a master's degree. They just promoted around me. And, so it was good to kind of have that experience in retrospect, because now I know that was really a strong value that I had when I did leave my company and start working for Madison Capital, because I knew that that's where I wanted. Yeah, I kind of saw I don't want to just be behind a desk and letting someone else take my investment committee memo and present it. I want to be the one. So, it was very important to me, and I got to have that with this move. So.
Yeah, I think it's very important. There's so many things I think that are interesting for this recent, and I think it's a somewhat recent phenomenon that you come out of college and maybe start your career, and are you looking for that next promotion in 2 years, and to realize that that's probably an unrealistic trajectory, one, to maintain, and two, to really gain the skills that mean you're ready for the next level, right? Because the next level of a promotion also comes with the next level of responsibility, exposure, carrying yourself through a situation, managing through a challenge, maybe delivering bad news, working your way through bad news. And so to keep in mind that, I use the analogy of the mountain when we were at the table, that yes, your career is going to climb this mountain, but that it's not always a linear path, right? And that all of the detours are worth it and valuable because they're all teaching. And so as we think about that, it's a great segue to, have any of you had mentors that were, specifically important in your career transition, and where did you gain those relationships?
I had two really great mentors while I was at USC. Neither one of them worked predominantly in development. One was a residential broker. The other was doing more investment management. And just developing those relationships, I thought that they were not only a guide, but they kind of, encouraged me to guide myself. They were asking questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And it wasn't necessarily, what role, like, what job do you want to have? Where do you want to, it was like really deep. Like, do you want to have kids? Do you want to be married? Where do you see yourself living? If you take this job, do you see yourself getting promoted? Do you see yourself pivoting? And I think them just starting to plant these little seeds in my head about it's okay to question things was really important. And, real estate is a really big industry, but it's really small. You keep coming across the same people. And when I was at Toll Brothers, a couple weeks into starting, I got a text from my mentor saying, hey, I just sold, I just represented a client on this house that was built by TJH. I think it could be a really great company for you to keep your eye on. And again, like, he just planted a seed, and 2 years later, a recruiter reached out to me. And so I think that having, people in the industry in general support you, you never know how that's going to come back around and benefit you. And I don't think your mentors always have to be the person who's in the role that you see yourself taking. Like, I'm in residential, but I have mentors who are in commercial real estate. I have mentors who are in residential real estate, and they all play a different role in your life. And I also think within work, finding mentors are really important. And I think that it doesn't necessarily need to be a formal process where you seek out a mentor. It can be someone who you foster a really great relationship with, and you start calling them and say, hey, can I pick your brain about this? I encountered this on the project site. I don't really know how to go about it. It doesn't have to always be your direct manager. I think that you can seek mentorship with people who you just feel comfortable having a candid conversation with. And that's really benefited me in the last few years.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I think, there are all these programs available that are more formal mentorship programs, but a lot of times those relationships can be forced, and then you're not really fostering a close relationship with that person. And I found, like, the best mentors in my life are the ones where I admire a person for a specific reason, and maybe they're in real estate, maybe they're not, but, mentors in different aspects of our lives, but you kind of cherry pick and you can put it all together, and they help you with a variety of different things. And so I think creating those more informal relationships where you have someone to go to about specific items and have a sounding board on stuff is so helpful.
And I think taking that initiative to ask that first question, like, hey, can I pick your brain? Can we grab coffee? It's pretty intimidating when you're just getting started. And I definitely remember looking back being like, they must think I'm like the weirdest, employee ever to want to grab coffee. But I now, didn't realize at the time, but I was forming those relationships and didn't even really know what a mentor was. But because I started, I was the one to initiate the effort and the interest and be curious. Then they ended up being that role in my life, and we've stayed connected. So I think it's always just kind of having that outlook of you don't know what piece of advice that person's going to have for you. And like she said, the cherry picking and kind of making it all come together is what makes you unique, but having their insight is so valuable. So, don't be afraid. I think almost anyone will want to help you if you approach them, and they'll make time for it.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had a formal mentor, but those relationships for me came a lot more naturally in work settings. And ironically, having those mentorships was really helpful because it helped me actually decide what I didn't want to do. I got to I spoke with people who were real estate lawyers, and I thought that might be something that I wanted to do. And people that were working in like private equity or like all of these realms. When I first started, I had no idea where to go, and those relationships are still strong, but it helped me point me in the right direction, not because I wanted to be just like them, but because they were able to give me more information and kind of guide me in the right direction. So I think a mentor also doesn't need to be like the person that you're trying to emulate, just someone that can help you go in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's really, those relationships are really important. And I want to make a bit of a distinction also, because when you're working inside of an organization, and if you're working with someone who is, let's say they're in your direct line of report, you report to your boss, you report to, or their boss's boss, or what have you. In the organization, those people are responsible for you. So that's different than a true mentoring relationship. A mentor relationship is not responsible for your performance or even in line to report on you, right? Also within your organization, there may be people who are, that you have relationships with, that you go to, that they can speak up for you. Can they be a sponsor for you? Can they say, there's a special project, we should get so-and-so involved, right? Mentors are often outside of your organization, often in your industry, sometimes not, because it depends on what it is that you're tapping into them for. So as you're thinking about building kind of your own personal, I heard someone say, oh, this is my own, my own executive council. They sort of built this team of people that they reached out to in building their career, and that way they could reach out to different people in different roles to assist them, but also it was kind of nice that they were kind of spreading it out so they weren't like burning any one person out, because you especially if you're navigating a challenge or there's something specific that you're trying to accomplish, you can have more than one resource that you are tapping into, and that could be really helpful. So have any of you taken on sort of being a mentor, whether it's with a student or someone in your workplace?
I feel like weird saying like, oh, I'm someone's mentor. You know what I mean? Like, but I do think like, and it just goes back to, creating personal relationships. Like, when someone young, especially like young women who are graduating college and they start working where I'm working, I feel like I want to, take them for lunch, get them under my wing. But, so I do try to create those relationships and create that open door for them so that they can call me or say, hey, meet for coffee anytime. So I think I've done that for several folks, which is nice, yeah.
And same to your point about like sometimes there's actual organized mentors and sometimes it's not like a forever relationship. Like you kind of go through the program and you both, meet and you know each other and you're cordial, but you end up not being in each other's lives. So that's okay too. Like if along the way you kind of have some quote unquote mentors that are now just acquaintances or colleagues, but at least it's still good just to initially kind of meet and know if there's going to be kind of a click there and a relationship moving forward.
Yeah, very important. And for those of you in the audience and for you on the stage, as soon as you have experience that is relevant to share, you can be a mentor, right? So you can be a mentor to a young girl. You can be a mentor to someone who's still in college. Age really doesn't have anything to do with it. It's about experience and perspective. And so as long as any of us are willing to open ourselves up and share our perspectives, then we're putting ourselves in a position to be a mentor. And I will say, as someone who has been a mentor many times, I get as much from being a mentor as I do from mentoring others, right? Because sharing our life experience is the main reason we're here. Right? If there wasn't that time to share with one another. And so anything that we can do to share those experiences helps us grow as we also are helping someone else grow. Okay, so that was really deep, and I wasn't trying to go quite that far today. Okay, so this is another question, and actually this came up from Mary's list, and I think it's an interesting one to say today, but I think it's also an interesting one just because we have so much kind of going on socially right now. Did you ever feel in your jobs as you're working in this male-dominated industry that you had to, act like a man or take on characteristics that you felt were unnatural to you to fit in?
Absolutely. I think, I kind of alluded to it earlier that I work for a company who didn't really give me the opportunity and continue to still kind of, I think, harbor that chip on my shoulder in a good way, though. It's like, I'll take it on. Like, let's go. I took it as a opportunity to never look back at that as something that held me back. And instead, it's something that I want to prove myself. And, my class actually just got together at an informal kind of get together this past weekend. And, the boys just have a way of kind of icing us out. And I'm just in there, just being like, no, I'm golfing with you. I'm, getting lunch with that group too. You are not doing a boys club thing. We are all here. So whether or not I'm invited, I am coming. So that's how my approach has been, but for better or for worse.
Yeah, I think you really do have to insert yourself and make yourself a seat at the table. And, even, we're 2025, I think that oftentimes I'm the only woman in the room or in the meeting, whatever it is. And personally, I find myself editing my speech a lot, which I struggle with personally, if I should be doing that or not. Emails oh, I shouldn't have as many exclamation points, or not apologizing for stuff because men do not apologize, things like that. So you have to find what works for you and, how you want to navigate everything. But I think in this current climate too, I feel like now there are just no apologists anymore. And I think I've found even just in the past month that folks feel okay, I have, back to my glory days, I have the right away to do whatever I want and don't care about your feelings or anything. So it's interesting to navigate, I think, in the workplace right now.
I think I was used to it pretty early on because in the real estate development program, there were classes where I was one of 3 or one of 2 women. And so I didn't really think much of it when I entered the workforce. I think it really hit me when I started working in construction. I would walk onto a job site and the trade partners would be like, "Oh, are you the homeowner?" Or, "Oh, are you the designer?" And I would say I wish I was a homeowner, but I would say, no, I'm the superintendent. I'm here overseeing the job site. And sometimes I find that, I'll have to ask 5 times to get something done. But at the same time in construction, there's 2 ways of doing things. One is to be the really aggressive, put your foot down, not talk down on individuals. And that's the one way to get things done. But I also had a really great superintendent who trained me, and he's like, you can do that, or you can do things respectfully. And, it might take a little longer for people to take you seriously. It might take a little longer for you to get something done. But if you respect people, they're going to respect you back. And then you also are able to, get people to do favors for you. So, if somebody has to do things twice, they're not going to, for example, in my business, charge me for having to come back for something small. I also think that in many ways it can play to your benefit being a woman in the industry because, there's 1 female superintendent, maybe 2 female superintendents. And so it's easier for them to remember you. And if you are going about your job, the right way, the respectful way, asking questions, I think that, you'll earn respect a lot faster than being one of 50 men.
Yeah, my first job out of USC, I was on a team of 8, and I was the only girl. And being my first job, I was like, I need to get in with the team. I need to make friends here, and I really need to do a good job. I bought a wetsuit to go surfing on the week. I don't know how to surf. Like, it was terrible. But I was definitely trying, I think, to be somebody that I wasn't, just to fit in, because I felt like that's what I needed to do. And that's not to say, like, don't try to make friends with the people that you're working with, but just be genuine about it, I guess, if you're trying to fit in. I'm lucky now in the place that I'm at now. I feel like my confidence really was boosted because I had the opposite experience. I felt like people at my company now really valued, still being one of like 2 women, they really valued our approach and also working in, maybe it's a construction thing. I think because it can be really aggressive. The approach that I was bringing, I think, just being ironically a little less emotional, a little less aggressive, and just angry at GCs all the time. I think that was really appreciated. And so I feel like if you're not, if you're asking questions and you're honest about what you know and what you don't know, and you're doing, you're presenting yourself in a professional way, I think men sometimes actually really do appreciate that alternate perspective. And of course, that's not always true, but that's what I found recently in my experience. So I feel a lot more confident being myself and not feeling like I need to act like a man anymore. I feel like being able to be a woman and like kind of gauge where you are in a room is actually a bit of a superpower because there's so few of us right now. So I've had a really good experience with that. So that's, it's been good.
I would say that I'm so glad to hear you guys say, the experience that you've had, one, recognizing that if you're working in a male-dominated field and you're not going to be able to fit in with the men that are in the field, it's going to make it really hard to be successful because the entire field is not going to change. That being said, it doesn't mean that now, I would say 25 years ago, the women who were really successful in real estate and were really they were all ball busters. They were. Because nobody was trying to open the door, nobody was trying to level the playing field. And so they elbowed their way in. That was not my personality. That's not the person that I ever wanted to be. But I was very curious and I was very effective. So it was like, if you want the job done, then you want me on it. Do you want a job? Do you want it done or don't you? Because that's how simple it is, right? And so being really effective was my leveler. Being, closing deals, making sure the due diligence worked, asking all the questions, being really intelligent about that let me be myself because my confidence was built on my effectiveness, right? And so, it's one thing we should be authentic, like she says. She's like, if I'm not a surfer, I don't really need the wetsuit, right? But at the same time, if we're working in a room where, that's who's in the room, we want to fit in so that the entire room doesn't have to change. Because if the entire room has to change, then it's no longer being effective about the job that you're at the table to do, right? So, it's just a really interesting time. So we're going to get we're close to wrapping up here. So I have one last question that I have for everybody, which was, what was sort of the best advice that you were given or advice that you would give that you think would be helpful in, to young women starting out in their career path?
I would just say be patient. I was really impatient when I graduated because I felt like I have so much energy and I have so much drive and I know I can make a big difference. And then you're kind of thrown into you're only considered for these entry-level roles, which sometimes don't feel like they're meeting your full potential. And so I was really frustrated at first, and I felt like for a bit I just plateaued. But every job, I guess I was really intentional about every job that I took because I knew where I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be in project management. And I just made sure that every step that I made was, maybe I wasn't moving up the ladder, but like I was broadening my skill set so that every job that I took was another thing that I could add to my resume. Like okay, maybe my role hasn't, I haven't climbed the ladder, but I can now do all these things. So I guess became more hireable. I don't know. And it made it easier when I was sitting in interviews because I could say, well, look at all these things I can do. And then eventually I was able to get the position that I really liked. But it did take a while because it wasn't just, for me at least, I didn't get my dream job out of school. So
When my first semester at USC, I actually had a pretty candid conversation with Russ. And I was nervous that the real estate development program was a little narrow for me. I had an interest in real estate, but I didn't really understand how big of an industry it was, how many different silos there were in the industry. And Russ told me, he said, it's just as important to find out what you don't want to do as it is to find out what you do want to do. And so I think in line with that is there's no such thing as wasted career experience. Just because, you don't want to end up in commercial real estate finance for the rest of your life doesn't mean that those 2 years of my work experience were wasted. I carry so much of what I learned in that first job and in my second job into my third job. And it's really great to like land where you want to be, but the route to get there is not, missed opportunity. It's something that I think benefits all of us in our career. Yeah,
for me, I've heard this advice in different ways from my different people, but I think and I've said it a few times today, but you really do have to be the one to like advocate for yourself, advocate for your career. I think some of my best work experiences have been for things that I raised my hand for in advance of them, popping up at work and telling managers, hey, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that. And so when something came up, they were like, oh yeah, Madison wants to do that. Madison wants that experience. And so they didn't have to, think about who should I put up for this. I was already top of mind. And that has been by far the best thing in my work experience.
And I would say that, ironically, you're getting a lot of advice, and throughout your career, I'm sure you've been told different things. And like what Madison touched on, it's always something that I struggle with too, is like, do I come off too girly when I'm emailing? Do I, am I apologizing? Am I emotional? And it's all this stuff that's like thrown about like out there in the world. And like at the end of the day, I think if you just focus on what you're good at, what you want to accomplish, and what you're there to do, like all of the other stuff is kind of fluffy. Like you can be more girly. You can have 2 exclamation points. Like, and you're still, closing that deal. Nobody cares, So I think not being caught up in kind of the small things and just being authentic to who you are and knowing your value and knowing what you offer and just really doing, what you're there to do and proving yourself ends up being kind of the reputation that goes with you throughout your career. So just that.
Well, thank you, ladies. Thank you guys so much. And we ran over just a little bit, but we hope this was really a fruitful conversation. And I think that we'll share contact information. And any of us up here will be happy to network and answer additional questions.
Thank you.